So imagine you're just, sweating in the sweltering Philadelphia heat of 1776.
Oh, yeah, the humidity there is brutal.
Right. And you're wearing this heavy wool suit, sitting in a hard, creaky wooden chair in this completely stuffed, crowded room.
Sounds miserable, honestly.
It really does. But the craziest part is, with absolute certainty that the signature you're about to put on a piece of parchment is, well, it's a treasonous act.
A literal death sentence.
Exactly. An act that will probably get you hanged by the most powerful empire on earth. And that visceral, terrifying reality, that is the difference between reading a history book and actually standing in the room where history was made.
Yeah, because in a textbook, the past is just flat.
Right, it's just a list of dates.
Dates and mythological names, But when you physically occupy the exact space where a revolution was declared or where thousands of soldiers fell, that whole abstraction just evaporates. You really feel the literal weight of the room.
Which is exactly why we are doing this today. Welcome to our deep dive. We're jumping into some incredible research from a source called Landmarks of Liberty, a journey through American history.
It's a fantastic text.
It really is. And just to be clear, our mission today is not to, help you plan your next family road trip.
Right. No travel itineraries here.
No, we are trying to extract the hidden stories behind America's most famous locations. We want to understand why millions of people all over the globe are so drawn to these specific physical coordinates.
Well, every city, every building, and every street has a story to tell.
Okay, let's unpack this, because these sites aren't just tourist traps, right?
No, not at all. They draw millions because they are these physical testaments to courage, to innovation, freedom, and, immense struggle.
Yeah, they are the very fabric of American history. So let's start right at the foundation.
The origins of the nation.
Exactly. And to understand that, we have to look at colonial Williamsburg in Virginia and Independence Hall in Pennsylvania.
Two very different places that do very similar work.
Right. So looking at colonial Williamsburg, it's kind of like, well, think about the last time you learned a hands-on skill. The moment you actually pick up the tools, your brain engages in a totally different way than just reading a manual, right?
Completely. It's night and day.
So Williamsburg basically weaponizes that sensory feedback. It's like this immersive, open-world historical video game.
That's a great way to put it.
You walk in and you literally smell the wood smoke and the manure. You hear the blacksmith hammer hitting hot iron.
And they're using traditional methods.
Yeah, exactly. It's a meticulous, interactive 18th century town. You've got actors, horse-drawn carriages. You are just dropped into the brutal daily grind of colonial life.
Which is so important because what's fascinating here is how it creates this profound empathy.
Oh, for sure.
Because you realize these people who were barely surviving the winter, dealing with disease and starvation, were somehow simultaneously conceptualizing a completely new form of government.
Right. It makes the political risks they took seem so much more astounding. You really feel the physical struggle there.
Yes. And that makes the leap to Independence Hall so interesting. If Williamsburg is the physical struggle, then Independence Hall is the intellectual crucible.
It's the control room. This is where the actual rules of the nation were coded.
Right. The Declaration of Independence in 1776, the drafting of the Constitution.
With figures like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. And going back to those old wooden chairs I mentioned earlier, when you stand in those historic meeting rooms, it strips away that marble column mythology we usually attach to the Founding Fathers.
They weren't gods on Mount Olympus.
Exactly. They didn't summon a nation into existence with magic. They argued, they compromised, they sweat through their shirts in this surprisingly small, claustrophobic brick building.
The proximity of the desks really drives that home. The quarters are so tight.
Yeah, and seeing that really makes the determination of those leaders suddenly feel incredibly real. You can practically feel the intense debates over the future of the colonies, or even, picturing the Liberty Bell just nearby.
Well, and interacting with these spaces teaches us such profound lessons about leadership. Standing in that specific room, you really have to consider the sheer audacity it took to look at the handful of men across from you and decide to sever ties with a global superpower.
It's just wild to think about.
It is. The text makes a great point here that experiencing history in 3 dimensions, actually being there, bridges the gap between the past and present in a way reading just cannot do.
Absolutely. And once those foundational ideals of freedom and independence were established in that room, they became a beacon, right? A literal physical beacon greeting newcomers arriving on America's shores.
which brings us perfectly to the symbols of arrival and innovation.
Right. So we are moving from the foundation to two massive coastal landmarks that represent totally different eras of American ambition: the Statue of Liberty in New York City and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco.
Both are just breathtaking feats of construction over water.
They really are. But here's where it gets really interesting, because these two coastal giants symbolize two completely different aspects of the American dream.
Right, they were built half a century apart.
Yeah, so let's look at Liberty first. Dedicated in 1886, it was a gift of friendship and freedom from France, designed by Frederick Auguste Bartholdi.
And you have to imagine being an immigrant arriving then.
Right. You've just survived weeks in the dark, cramped steerage of a ship, and suddenly you see this colossal green statue holding a torch and a tablet. It was a symbol of hope for millions.
It was a promise of a new life.
Exactly, a monument of ideological hope. But then you jump to 1937, to the Golden Gate Bridge. The source describes it as an engineering miracle.
It really was. Spanning a mile of churning ocean with that elegant Art Deco suspension design.
And that iconic orange-red color. So I have to ask you, how does the transition from a monument of ideological hope, like the Statue of Liberty, to a monument of technological ambition, like the Golden Gate, reflect the nation's rapid development?
It's such a beautiful synthesis, honestly. Because while Liberty welcomed people with the promise of a new life, the Golden Gate Bridge represents the actual realization of that modern ambition.
The actual execution of it.
Exactly. It proves the nation's capacity for rapid development and engineering mastery. The Statue of Liberty said, "Come here and be free," and the Golden Gate Bridge said, "Look at what we can build with that freedom."
Wow, yeah. It's the shift from a nation hoping to survive to a nation really flexing its muscle.
It's an assertion of dominance over nature.
Right, but to manage that kind of massive industrial powerhouse, you need a stable central nervous system. You have to have a place directing all of this.
The executive power.
Exactly, which brings us to the physical embodiments of executive power and national identity: the White House in Washington, D.C., and Mount Rushmore in South Dakota.
These are such heavily curated symbols of democracy.
They really are. And just looking at the White House, it's been the residence of every single president since John Adams in 1800.
It survived a lot, too.
Oh, a ton. Wars, political crises. I mean, it survived the War of 1812 when British forces completely set it on fire.
Right, it's a resilient building.
Very. And then, way out in the Black Hills of South Dakota, you have Mount Rushmore, a 14-year carving project that started in 1927.
Right, with the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln.
Yeah. But I am actually going to push back a little bit on grouping these two together here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, the White House is an active, working political building, right? Decisions that affect millions of people are made there every single day.
That's true.
So isn't that fundamentally different from a static artistic monument like Mount Rushmore? Like, one is a living command center and the other is just a rock carving.
I see what you mean, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, they are actually doing the same job. They are both carefully constructed symbols of the nation's narrative. The White House projects immediate continuity and stability to the world. And Mount Rushmore is a highly intentional, literal carving of the nation's identity into stone.
Okay, intentional how? Like, why those specific four guys?
Well, the sculptor didn't just pick names out of a hat. It's a specific story. Washington represents the founding. Jefferson represents expansion and the growth of democracy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. And then Roosevelt represents rapid economic growth and industrialization. And Lincoln, of course, represents unity and preservation during the Civil War.
Oh, wow. So it's birth, growth, development, and preservation.
Exactly. It is the storyboard of the country, blasted into granite so it can never be altered. It's the curation of the mythology that the White House actively operates under.
That is fascinating. Okay, I see the connection now. But, you know, the narrative of a nation isn't just about beautiful mountain carvings and successful engineering.
No, definitely not.
Any honest look at a country has to include the dark parts. We have to dive into the crucible of conflict and confinement. And our source highlights three major ones: the Gettysburg Battlefield, Pearl Harbor, and Alcatraz Island.
Right. These are sites of profound tragedy and struggle.
Yeah. Let's start with Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, July 1863. There were over 50,000 casualties in just 3 days.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
It really is. It was a massive turning point that stopped the Confederate invasion of the North, and it was followed months later by Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, focusing on freedom, equality, and unity.
A completely defining moment.
And then you have Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, December 7th, 1941, a surprise attack by Japan that killed over 2,400 people and plunged the U.S. into World War II.
Such a tragic, pivotal day.
Yeah. You can actually go there and stand on the USS Arizona Memorial, which sits directly above the sunken battleship. And finally, there's Alcatraz Island in California.
The inescapable prison.
Exactly, sitting right there in the San Francisco Bay, surrounded by cold water's incredibly strong currents. In the 1930s and 40s, it housed notorious figures like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly under incredibly strict routines.
Right. So what does this all mean?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, to you listening right now, think about this. What stands out to you? Why do you think we are so drawn to visiting places of immense tragedy or, like with Alcatraz, rigid confinement? These aren't joyous places.
No, they aren't. And this raises an important question about the human need to process sacrifice.
Process it physically, you mean?
Exactly. We preserve places like Gettysburg and Pearl Harbor to remind us of the actual physical cost of peace and national unity.
Right.
When you stand at Gettysburg and see the open ground the soldiers had to cross, or when you look down at the sunken remains of the USS Arizona, it forces a reckoning. It ensures we learn from the struggles of previous generations.
It makes the history undeniably real. But what about Alcatraz? That's not really about national sacrifice in the same way.
No, Alcatraz is different. It taps into a deep human fascination with mystery, extreme conditions, and escape stories.
Like pushing the limits of human endurance.
Exactly. It's about exploring the absolute edge of civilization's control. Exploring these sites teaches us about resilience, but it also allows us to safely brush up against the darker side of society.
Which really brings this all together perfectly. History is not just about the past. It continues to actively shape the present.
It absolutely does.
Whether it's the creaky wooden chairs of Independence Hall, where a radical idea was born, or the sunken remains of the USS Arizona, where thousands sacrificed everything, these landmarks are vital physical tools for understanding culture, heritage, and what we've achieved as a society.
They're the primary sources written in steel, stone, and earth.
And tracing how these landmarks reflect their specific eras leads to a really interesting question for today.
It really does. So for you listening, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own.
Lay it on us.
If society today were to construct a brand new historical landmark, something designed to perfectly define the current generation for people hundreds of years in the future, what would it look like?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Right. What materials or ideals would it be built from? And crucially, in our increasingly digital world, would it even be a physical place at all?
Wow. A digital monument. I mean, could a server farm ever carry the same emotional weight as Mount Rushmore? That completely redefines what a landmark is.
Something to think about.
It really is. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive through America's past, exploring why standing exactly where history happened changes everything. Keep exploring, keep questioning the spaces around you, and as always, keep learning. See you next time.